The cursor blinked steadily on the last line of the gateway protocol as I opened the secure window to send the final layer of biometric verification for a $100 million defense contract, a deal that had taken 9 months, 4 international trips, and 3 sleepless nights to close. Suddenly, the door swung open without a knock, and in walked Gregory Carrington, the CEO himself, not alone, but followed by a young woman dressed in a powder blue pantsuit, clutching a tablet like it was a prize. She looked barely old enough to rent a car. "Olivia," Gregory said with casual ease, "this won't take long." I sat up straighter. "What is this about?" I asked. He gave a peculiar smile. "We're starting a leadership transition, effective immediately." I blinked. "Thrown off immediately? I'm retiring at 5 today. I just need to—" He cut me off, motioning to the woman behind him. "You've done more than enough. This is Chloe. She'll be taking over now, my niece." His niece. I turned slowly to her. She smiled wide and eagerly, reaching out her hand as if we were old friends catching up over brunch. "I've been shadowing digital strategy upstairs," she said brightly. "It's such an honor." I didn't move. The secure window was still open on my screen, the cursor blinking patiently beside the line that read, "Final voice verification required." Gregory cleared his throat. "Security will assist with the transition. Your belongings will be sent to your home." My mouth opened, but no words came out. 28 years I'd devoted to this company. I'd drafted that contract, nurtured the client relationship from scratch. Just 3 weeks ago, I was personally asked to oversee the final stage, and now I was being replaced mid-shift by a niece in designer heels who had never met the client. As I stood, my chair still warm behind me, I glanced back at the screen. The system waited for me. It wouldn't accept input from anyone else. But Gregory didn't know that not yet. "Congratulations, Chloe," I said at last, taking her hand. "I hope you understand what you're stepping into." Her grip tightened just a bit, but her smile didn't falter. I logged out without closing the system, grabbed my blazer, and left without looking back. The cursor kept blinking behind me. Waiting, I hadn't expected a parade, but I thought maybe a card, a simple handshake, a nod in the hallway, or even a "thank you, Olivia." Standing in front of my desk, where I'd spent nearly 3 decades, I realized the farewell had already happened, and I hadn't been invited. The floor was quieter than usual, which was saying something. No one met my gaze. Most junior staff pretended to be on calls, typing furiously on keyboards that weren't even on the same people who once sought my advice, now couldn't lift their heads. I opened my desk's top drawer, the one that held my favorite pens, emergency Tylenol, and an old photo of our first executive team. Only a few things were worth taking. The rest they could keep. I pulled out a worn leather notebook filled with client notes spanning years, names no longer in business, others I'd helped grow from startups to global enterprises, names Chloe had never heard of, names Gregory had long forgotten. A cardboard box sat beside my chair. The office manager must have left it while I was still with Gregory efficient, cold, no bow, no label. I went through the motions, gathering books, files, a framed certificate from a procurement conference in Zurich, when I noticed something. My nameplate was gone from the glass wall outside my office, where it had read Olivia Meyer, Senior Director of Strategic Contracts. A new plaque had already been mounted. Chloe Carrington, Director, Emerging Ventures. They'd erased 28 years of service in a single afternoon and slapped on a title that sounded like an unpaid internship. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I sat down one last time and stared at the monitor. Using my admin credentials, I logged into the master directory. I deleted nothing that would harm the company, but wiped every personal document, old memo, and training manual I'd ever created. The only thing left untouched was a small, silent program buried deep in the system. Gateway Final. It looked like a basic script, harmless and forgettable, but it contained the biometric encryption necessary to trigger the final payment release on the $100 million deal. It couldn't be accessed remotely, overridden, or rewritten. Without a complete system overhaul, only one person could use it correctly. Me. As I shut down the screen, a ping echoed. A notification from my now disconnected company email. which I'd forgotten to close subject. Congrats to Chloe Sender, execoms@carrington.com. Please join us in congratulating Chloe Carrington on her promotion to Director of Emerging Ventures. Her fresh energy and vision will guide Carrington into a new era of innovation. They'd sent it to me by mistake. If only for a moment I imagined replying with something brief, something sharp, but instead closed the tab. What could I say? That I gave them my best years while Chloe walked in with her last name and a LinkedIn profile? I sealed the box shut and stood. My heels clicked across the floor as I left, each step heavier than the last. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. Bitterness burned in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Let them cheer for Chloe. They had no idea what they'd just locked themselves out of. I thought it couldn't get more insulting than being replaced mid-shift. But the next 48 hours proved otherwise. Carrington wasn't just eager to erase me. They wanted to parade the replacement like a prize pig at a tech expo. My inbox, whatever remained accessible under my personal domain, was suddenly flooded with press releases and LinkedIn announcements. There she was, Chloe Carrington, barely 24, sitting at my desk in my chair, even using the mug my assistant had gifted me 5 birthdays ago. One email was a mass announcement from the executive communications team, sent to hundreds across the industry. Chloe Carrington officially takes the helm as Director of Emerging Ventures, having secured a historic $100 million defense contract. Carrington Ears welcomes her innovative lens and generational insight in this bold new chapter. Attached was a high-res photo of Chloe, smiling confidently, legs crossed in a power pose, her glittering heels catching the light like currency, one arm draped over the back of my ergonomic chair. At the bottom of the email, a faint line read, "Photo taken from Olivia Meyer's former office." I clicked the link to the full interview. A glossy finance startup had already picked her up, running a profile titled, "The Gen Z Dealmaker Disrupting Defense Procurement." Disrupting? She couldn't even get procurement right. With my arms folded, I watched the interview unfold. Chloe leaned in slightly, like a TED speaker rehearsed to perfection, projecting a confidence that felt forced. "This deal boiled down to bold intuition," she said. "When I analyzed the numbers, I just felt it was the perfect moment to push the boundaries. The client, Constellia Erasure, was eager for fresh perspectives." Constellia Erasure. The real name was Constellar Erasure, one of the top names in government aviation logistics, and she completely butchered it on camera. Yet, she pressed on, unaware, "I made the decision to finalize terms ahead of schedule. I didn't see the need to delay. We had to be decisive. I had to stop the video. She never made those calls. I did. She never endured 12 weeks of midnight Zoom meetings with general counsel. I did. She never hammered out the compliance clause that took 4 rewrites and a grueling 5-hour standoff. I did. She simply inherited the work and slapped her initials on it like a kid with glitter glue. The worst part? People were buying into it. Comments below praised inspiring young leadership and claimed legacy roles must make way. I wanted to scream, but instead closed the browser and opened a message I'd been dodging all day. A direct message from Marcus Hanley, one of the few directors who hadn't looked away as I passed his office. Marcus saw the clip. This isn't right. We both know it." I didn't answer. What could I say? That seeing someone flaunt my title, my achievements, my office while mangling the very essence of a deal she didn't grasp was a slap in the face to everything I'd built? That the bitterness I swallowed yesterday was morphing into something sharper, closer to rage. I stood and walked to the window outside. The city skyline sparkled under the afternoon sun, just like Chloe's gaudy shoes, flashy, superficial, and utterly useless in a storm they'd given her the chair, sure. But they didn't realize the system beneath that chair, the one blinking silently in the background, waiting for the final voice authorization, still belonged to me. She might be holding the camera, but I still held the power cord, and I wasn't finished watching. The thing about security systems is they aren't easy to crack, and I made damn sure of that. 6 months before my final contract, Carrington's firewall was breached. It didn't hit the headlines, but it rattled us internally. A 0-day exploit reached the finance backend. Gregory waved it off as a reminder to tighten protocols and went back to polishing board decks. But I knew better. That breach came too close to the contract pipeline. It wouldn't happen again. Not under my watch. So I took steps most directors wouldn't bother with. I built a protocol inside the Gateway Final system, a biometric verification script with 3 clearance levels: voice recognition, terminal lock, and geolocation matching. In other words, the contract could only be signed from my office machine, using my voice, not because I distrusted the company, but because I didn't trust whoever might one day run it. Now, locked out of that office, I watched from the sidelines as Chloe pretended nothing had changed except the signature. But the gate didn't care about job titles. It didn't respond to Director of Emerging Ventures. It didn't recognize surnames. It recognized me. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Jacob, an old colleague from IT, young, quiet, painfully intelligent, had shadowed me on systems for years. If anyone could spot something was wrong, it was him. Jacob, Olivia, did you set up biometric layers on Gateway Final? They're trying to push the contract, but it keeps rejecting everything. My stomach dropped. They're what? Yeah, Chloe's trying to sign off the final transfer, but the system's locked. It's asking for full confirmation from the origin signature source. Nobody here knows what that means. Of course they didn't. I coded it myself with the CTO's quiet approval. She signed off on my custom safeguards when I told her it was insurance, but she'd left last quarter for a fintech startup, and Chloe didn't even know the gate existed until it refused to respond. Did you tell anyone? Gregory's furious. He asked me to reset it. I told him it's impossible without destroying the confirmation log. He told me to keep quiet. I closed my eyes. They were scrambling. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career crafting contracts to protect them from outside threats, and now I'd become the internal threat they couldn't control. But here's the worst part. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't walk in and explain the layers, the voice modulations needed, that only I could authorize the final step, that would be admitting I still held the key, and handing it over freely. They'd accuse me of sabotage, claim I set a trap I hadn't. I just ensured no one else could pretend to be me. And now I was watching my legacy grind to a halt behind a gate they didn't even know existed last week. I stared out the window for a long time. I pictured Chloe tapping impatiently, staring at the blinking cursor like it was broken. I saw Gregory pacing, barking orders no one could follow. And I imagined Jacob caught in the middle, smart enough to see the truth, but young enough to be silenced with a single line. Don't make this political. Powerlessness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silence when you know everything but can't act. Sometimes it's watching the gate you built to protect everything become the thing locking you out. And the worst? They still think they're in control. I hadn't planned to watch the company-wide live stream. Honestly, I tried to avoid it. But at 9:55 a.m., a calendar alert popped up. Leadership transition plus strategic milestone announcement. Curiosity 1. I opened my laptop and clicked the link. The Carrington Air logo flickered on screen, followed by a slick montage, jets taking off, executives shaking hands, glowing headlines about record growth and bold new directions. None of those headlines bore my name, though I'd written half those contracts. The screen cut to the main auditorium. Gregory stood center stage, flanked by giant monitors and a glowing Carrington crest, calm and rehearsed, a man who'd done this many times before. But I knew that look. It was the same cold enthusiasm he wore during layoffs. Good morning, team, he began steadily. Today marks the start of a new chapter in Carrington's story. I leaned back, waiting for him to continue. As we look ahead, we honor those who paved the way, but we also acknowledge that every organization must grow and change. Sometimes that means letting go of what once was, no matter how fundamental it seemed. Letting go, that's what I'd become. A what? He smiled and gestured to the side. It's my privilege to introduce someone who embodies the future of this company, a new generation of leadership defined by intuition, innovation, and speed. Please welcome Chloe Carrington. The camera shifted to Chloe, striding across the stage in a crisp white pantsuit, those same sparkling heels clicking confidently with every step. She took the microphone and smiled as though she hadn't just bulldozed 28 years of legacy without a blink. Thank you, Uncle Greg, she said sweetly. Taking over negotiations for the erasure contract was an incredible learning experience. I realized quickly this deal was about more than just numbers. It was about setting the tone, showing clients Carrington is agile, decisive, and future-focused. She hadn't been there when the deal nearly fell apart over satellite access rights. She hadn't flown to Brussels during the rail strike to meet legal counsel in person. She hadn't endured 12 consecutive calls to renegotiate delivery terms amid a global supply chain crisis. Yet here she was, claiming it all, my work, my voice, my chair, wrapped up in buzzwords like disruption and vision. Behind her, one monitor displayed a timeline of key milestones. Not once did it mention my name. Even the project code had changed. What I'd called Project Orion was now Venture Sky. The screen cut briefly to a row of department heads. One was my former colleague, Laia Moreno, blinking back tears. She'd been with me since the beginning, a steady presence in procurement. The camera lingered just long enough to catch her wiping her cheek, then abruptly shifted to a wide crowd shot, scripted, controlled. The applause that followed sounded hollow, even through my speakers. As the meeting closed, Gregory gave his final remarks. We appreciate all past leaders' contributions, but we must keep moving forward. Stagnation is the enemy of progress. Stagnation, that's what I was to him, to all of them. I stared at the screen long after the broadcast ended. I'd devoted my entire career to this company, sacrificing holidays, sleep, even family dinners to meet goals and close deals, and now I was wiped away as if I'd never existed. No name, no thanks. Just a polite erasure beneath corporate slogans and a pair of designer heels. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, but inside, something shifted. Cold, silent, and razor-sharp. Because if they thought this was the end of my story, they were very, very wrong. The morning after the stream, I sat at the kitchen table in silence, nursing a half-empty cup of coffee long cold. Outside, the city buzzed, people rushing to jobs where they still mattered. I stared at my laptop, unsure what to do with the blinking cursor. A draft email had sat open for 2 days. Nothing grand, no accusations, no bitterness, just a simple thank you note to one person who'd treated me as a human, not a vendor. Throughout this exhausting deal, Marcus Levinson, Senior Procurement Director at Constellar Aerotech. He'd been there from the first handshake. We spent hours combing over clauses, debating timelines, hashing specs over midnight calls across continents. In a world of inflated egos and political games, Marcus had always been straightforward. He deserved a proper goodbye. Even if no one else thought I did, I reread the draft. Dear Marcus, thank you for the opportunity to work with you these past few months. Despite the complexities, I truly valued the partnership and trust we built throughout this process. I wish you all the best as the agreement moves into final implementation. Warm regards, Olivia Meyer. Short, polite, clean, the kind of message I'd sent 1,000 times before. Yet this one felt heavier than all the rest I hovered over send for what felt like forever. Then I clicked. It left my screen like a whisper. I didn't expect a reply, especially not so soon. But less than an hour later, my inbox pinged from Marcus Levinson, subject, Re-thank you, Olivia. I'm confused. Are you no longer on the project? We weren't told of any transition. Also, something strange came up. Our compliance team flagged a version discrepancy in the final contract. PDF. There are line edits and formatting changes in the execution version we received yesterday that weren't in our last joint review. We're pulling metadata now. Can you clarify who's leading from Carrington? My stomach tightened. They didn't know. No one at Carrington told them I was out. No courtesy call, no handoff, not even a CCD email. Worse, they'd altered the contract after I left more than disrespect. It was dangerous. I started typing, then stopped. I couldn't say what I wanted, not without sounding like I was undermining my own company, not without risking legal backlash, so I replied simply, Marcus, unfortunately, I'm no longer involved with the project. I wish I could offer more clarity, but I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of Carrington anymore. However, you may want to revisit the fine print on page 42. Respectfully, Olivia. It was subtle, but if he looked, he'd find it. At the bottom of that page was a timestamp field. Confirmation pending via biometric gateway activation required from Origin system. It had been in every draft since version 7. I'd fought to keep it there as a final control. Apparently, Chloe and her team either didn't know what it meant or didn't care. Marcus replied 15 minutes later. That clause is still present. We didn't approve its removal. If Carrington can't fulfill that field, the contract isn't valid. Let me check with legal and get back to you. I stared at his words long and hard. I should have felt triumphant, justified, vindicated, but all I felt was hollow, like I was drifting through the collapse of a building I helped build, watching others paint over my name as the foundation cracked. For the first time in weeks, I said it aloud to no one. They don't know what they're doing. And now they were about to find out it started with a ding, not the victorious chime of a completed transfer, but a hollow electronic thud, then silence. Then the spinning wheel. Chloe leaned closer to the monitor, her lips pressed into a tight line as the screen flickered twice before flashing an error in harsh red letters. Gateway, final authorization, failed security environment mismatch. She clicked repeatedly, each tap of her manicured finger on the trackpad growing more desperate, as if force could change the outcome behind her. A small crowd had formed in the glass-walled executive boardroom. 2 junior assistants, a visibly sweating IT manager, and Gregory pacing nervously near the window. It had been exactly 19 minutes since Chloe tried to authorize the final transfer of the $100 million contract. 19 minutes of loading bars, soft system restarts, hushed side conversations, and Chloe's forced smile slowly fading into frustration. "Why isn't it going through?" she finally snapped, spinning to face the IT lead. "I did everything you told me." Brent, a pale, balding man in his late 40s, shifted uneasily. "It's not that simple. The system recognizes the request, but flags a mismatch in the environment. The terminal you're using isn't registered as the origin node." Gregory cut in sharply. "Explain in plain English, Brent." Brent swallowed hard. The system only accepts final authorization from the original device where the contract was created and negotiated, Olivia's desktop, not just any Carrington terminal. Chloe blinked. "Can't you override it? Reassign the endpoint or something?" He shrugged helplessly. "That requires root-level admin clearance. Olivia was the only one with that. She encrypted the gateway with a 3-factor biometric lock tied to her user profile." Gregory's face twisted in disbelief. "You're telling me we can't sign the biggest deal of the decade because of a computer setting?" Brent hesitated. "Not exactly. We could recreate the system, but it would take days, possibly weeks, and the client would have to re-authenticate on their side. It would be starting over." A vein throbbed in Gregory's temple as he pulled out his phone and dialed on speaker, "Get Jessica and Guillen on the line now." Jessica, Carrington's former chief security officer, now head of data privacy at a tech compliance firm across town, answered after 2 rings. "Greg, what's going on?" "I need you to confirm something," Gregory said, voice clipped. "Did Olivia Meyer install a proprietary security script on Gateway Final requiring authentication from her original workstation?" Silence. Then Jessica sighed. "Yes. She implemented that after last year's back-end breach scare. You signed off on it yourself, remember? You called it excessive but clever." Gregory closed his eyes. "Is there no way to bypass it without corrupting the contract log or triggering a rollback?" "That gateway isn't just a lock, it's a vault," Jessica replied. "She built it to shut down if tampered with." Chloe looked between them, voice rising. "Wait, so we can't finalize anything?" Gregory muttered something and stepped out of frame. In the silence, Brent leaned over and whispered, "There's one more thing the system keeps showing a secondary message." Chloe narrowed her eyes. "What message?" He turned the screen toward her, awaiting origin signature. Miro Chloe sank into the chair, my chair, and stared blankly at the blinking screen. The tension thickened. This was no longer a mere technical glitch. It was a full stall. The clock ticked. The client waited, and the one person who could fix it had been forced out 24 hours ago, miles away in my living room. A single-word message from Jacob, the young IT analyst, popped up. "They're panicking." I didn't respond. Instead, I sat silently, watching the cursor blink on my personal device with the same calm patience as the day I walked out. The gate was doing exactly what I designed it to do. It was waiting for me at 11:42 p.m. My phone rang again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I'd been expecting the call. Not from a colleague, not from Carrington, but from the only person left who understood the stakes. Marcus Levinson. His name lit up my screen just as I finished washing my dinner plate. I dried my hands, settled at the kitchen table, and answered with a calm, born not of confidence, but quiet revenge. Olivia Meyer. There was a pause long enough to signal this wasn't a casual chat. "I read your message," he said. "I looked at page 42. I said nothing, waiting. "I need to ask you something. Off the record, unofficial, strictly as someone trying to understand what's happening on our end." "I'm listening." "Did you build a biometric gateway into the final contract confirmation system? One that locks execution to a specific terminal, voice print, and location?" I leaned back, exhaling slowly, letting the weight settle on his side. "I did. It was authorized internally after last year's firewall scare. You and I reviewed that clause. It's in version 7. He cursed under his breath. "They didn't tell us anything. The Carrington team's acting like the delay is just an IT hiccup, but nothing is going through. They're stalling." I wasn't surprised. His voice dropped. "The metadata on the final contract we received yesterday doesn't match what we signed. Someone altered the formatting, redated the approval log." "That would explain the versioning problem," I said. "They tried slipping in an unsigned clause," he muttered, "but that gateway stopped it dead. Your protocol flagged it as inconsistent. That's what it was made for." Another pause. I pictured him now, sleeves rolled, leaning forward on his desk, frustration and disbelief on his face. "Olivia," he said carefully, "is Carrington trying to fake the finalization?" I wasn't in a position to say he caught my meaning and read the silence between the lines. "They erased your name from the deal," Marcus said tightly. "Every document, every chain, as if you never existed, but the system still knows you were there." I smiled grimly. "That system wasn't built to remember names," I said. "It was built to detect absence." A short, bitter laugh came through. "I'm escalating this internally. If they won't explain, we'll freeze the contract until further notice." "Understood," I said. "Let me know if there's anything I can do, unofficially." "You've done enough, Olivia." As the call ended, I stared at the silent phone in my hand. The city's hum faded beneath my thoughts. For the first time in days, I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't erased. They tried wiping me from history, but they couldn't sign off the system without me. Now, the person they tried to hide was the one their client called in the dead of night. Not because I asked, but because truth always finds its way back. At 6:02 a.m., the Carrington offices were unusually bright. Not with excitement, but heavy with tension. Chloe arrived before dawn, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor of the executive wing, clutching a large iced coffee in one hand and a shaking phone in the other. Gone was her typical confident stride. Her face was pale, eyes bloodshot. Either from sleepless nights or a flood of unanswered frantic calls, she headed straight into the executive conference room, where Gregory paced in his shirt sleeves, his hair disheveled and a dark stain marring his collar. Slowly, the security team filtered in, still zipping jackets, checking watches, holding coffees left untouched. The big screen displayed breaking news. Aero Times, the most widely read online finance publication in the industry, had just published a story 40 minutes earlier. The headline blared, "Carrington Air fails to authorize $100 million government deal due to internal security conflict." Sources claimed the failure was caused by a deliberately designed authentication protocol tied solely to a recently terminated executive. Gregory barked, "Who leaked that email?" Silence. Chloe sat at a spare desk, opening her personal laptop and squinting at the screen as she typed admin credentials for the third time that morning. The cursor blinked. "Access denied, invalid biometric ID terminal mismatch incident logged." She slammed the laptop shut, whispering, "It's still locked." Brent from IT looked exhausted. "Of course it is. The protocol's environment-specific, only Olivia's original device can authorize." Gregory spun on him, furious. "Then find the device, clone it, reverse engineer it." Brent shook his head. It doesn't work like that. The biometric lock is encrypted in hardware and tied to her physical voice signature and terminal MAC address. Even duplicating the machine won't bypass it. Chloe's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone to text Gregory caught her glance. "Who are you messaging?" "The PR team," she replied quickly. "We need to get ahead of this." But it was already too late. Minutes later, the story had exploded. Blogs reposted it, former employees shared it on LinkedIn, and Twitter buzzed with finance types mocking Carrington's tech failure. Some speculated Olivia engineered it as revenge. Others admired the irony. By 7:30 a.m., things worsened. A second email leaked. A forwarded thread between Brent, compliance, and Marcus at Constellar Aerotech had accidentally been CC'd to the press subject. "We can't override Meyer contract, unexecutable, keep this internal." It was over. Across town, I stirred milk into tea, watching the sunrise over the skyline. The living room smelled faintly of jasmine. My phone buzzed, once, twice again, from Jacob. "They're freaking out, you're everywhere" on internal Slack Aero Times leaked the email chain. Then Marcus. "Heads up, your name's trending on 2 trade forums. The board's in lockdown." I didn't reply. I set the phone down and sipped my tea, smooth and clean. Let them scramble, let them fumble trying to control a system they never wanted to understand. Let them regret taking shortcuts over integrity. I hadn't lied or sabotaged anything. The system worked as designed, protecting the deal from unauthorized access, preserving original terms. Their mistake was removing me from the building but forgetting I designed the infrastructure. The more they forced, the stronger the gate resisted, and now the world was watching. At 9:20 a.m., an email from Gregory arrived, subject: "Request for meeting, urgent. Olivia, we would appreciate a chance to discuss recent developments around the erasure contract. Please let me know your availability today. Best, Gregory Carrington." No apology, no admission of wrongdoing. Just a polished request, as if I were a lost file they needed located. I stared, then typed a single line in reply. "I will meet at my attorney's office, 1 p.m. Miriam Hensley's office was in a modest brick building just off Lexington Avenue, nothing flashy, but the kind of place that made executives sweat. At 12:57, I arrived early and sat with Miriam in a glass-walled conference room. She peered over her reading glasses as I handed her a sleek brown folder, everything they need to see. I nodded silently. At 1:03, Gregory entered alone. His tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. He looked less like the confident CEO boasting innovation and more like a man who hadn't slept in days. He extended a hand. I didn't take it. "Olivia," he said low, almost pleading, "thank you for meeting. I know things didn't go as planned." I let silence hang. He sat opposite me. "You know why I'm here?" "I do." He glanced at the folder Miriam slid forward. "Is that it?" I nodded. Inside was a printed code ownership agreement from 10 months ago, signed by me and the former CTO, confirming my authorship and conditional control of the Gateway Final Protocol. Also included a digital timestamp, third-party verification certificate, and a clause stating no edits or overrides could happen without my consent. Gregory skimmed, then pressed a hand to his forehead. "I need your help," he said, voice cracking, the client's threatening to walk. "The press is circling, the board's panicking. We can't get final authentication without your voice. And Chloe? She's not ready." He looked up. "We made mistakes, but you built this company with us. We need you now." I leaned back, steady. "You didn't just remove me, Gregory. You erased me. No transition, no recognition. You replaced me with a child in glitter heels and told the world she secured a deal she barely understands." He flinched. "You used my work, my systems, my name, until it was inconvenient. Now, when the infrastructure reminds you who built it, you come running." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "I'm not your backup plan, not your emergency exit. I don't exist to fix the mess you made." Gregory looked down. "I'll authorize whatever bonus you want." "Name the number," Miriam said, clearing her throat. "That won't be necessary." I rose slowly, smoothing the front of my blazer. "You had your chance to honor my legacy," I told him. "Instead, you traded it for appearances." He looked beaten. "So what now?" I walked to the door, paused with my hand on the knob, then turned back. You wanted a future without me, Gregory. Now you have it. Casting one last glance at the folder on the table, I said firmly, Legacy isn't free. And then I left outside. The sun was dipping just beyond the skyline. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the afternoon air, surrounded by people rushing every which way, but I felt calm, clear. They expected me to crawl back, fix the fire they started, and smile politely doing it. Instead, I let the building burn on its own. When you spend decades building something right, you don't need to scream. You just step back and let the cracks speak for themselves. By the time the official announcement dropped, I was already at Camden Rowers, a quiet cafe on East 46th, sipping black coffee and reading the paper like any ordinary Thursday. The morning rush had faded to the soft hum of laptops, the occasional hiss of steamed milk, and clinking cups peaceful, except inside Carrington, I imagined, where peace was the last thing anyone felt. At 8:37 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not a call, but a push notification. Constellar erasure press release. Immediate distribution due to significant concerns about transparency, protocol integrity, and leadership transition mismanagement. Constellar erasure has terminated the pending $100 million procurement agreement with Carrington Heiress. Effective immediately, I blinked once and scrolled down. The second paragraph said everything. While our team values the partnership efforts of Carrington's legacy leadership, recent handling of key security operations has caused an irrevocable loss of confidence in the company's current direction. No names, but no need. They named what I stood for: integrity, stability, clarity, and what Carrington had become: uncertain, performative, hollow. Within 12 minutes, Carrington's stock dropped 6%. By noon, it had fallen. Nearly 9 analysts, scrambled reporters called it a wake-up call for legacy firms underestimating institutional knowledge. Twitter told a different story. Clips of Chloe's disastrous interview resurfaced. Her mispronunciation of Constellar erasure, her claim to have made the final call closing the deal early. One user posted, "Imagine losing a $100 million contract because you replaced your top exec with your niece who can't say the client's name." Another said, "Respect to whoever coded that security lockout. That's how you keep power." I said nothing. No likes, no shares, just quiet observation. Across the table, Marcy, a friend from the nonprofit board I'd joined last year, glanced at my screen. "Is that the deal you worked on?" I nodded. "Is it bad you're smiling?" I looked down at the corner of my lips, surprised. "No," I said. "It's just rare to see consequences arrive on time." She laughed softly and returned to her coffee. By mid-afternoon, word spread internally that Chloe Carrington was removed from all active projects pending executive review. PR speak for exile, a shiny title on a door no one would knock on again. According to a source, Jacob texted me, Gregory called an emergency board meeting at 10:05 a.m. They tried blaming technical hiccups, miscommunication, but the board wasn't buying it. Screenshots, leaked emails, and an escalating shareholder storm demanded answers. Compliance, likely Brent, quietly passed audit trails showing Chloe's failed attempts to override the Gateway final protocol, timestamps, error messages, rejection logs. One inescapable truth: they didn't lose the contract because of sabotage. They lost it because they erased the one person who knew how to finish the job. I folded my phone and set it face down. Silence settled over me. For the first time in weeks, maybe days, the weight lifted. Not revenge, not rage, just closure. I hadn't screamed, threatened, or leaked. I'd done what they never expected. I walked away and let the foundation speak for itself. Truth always finds air, especially when buried beneath silence and spectacle. They thought I'd need them. They never imagined they'd need me. Now, in the aftermath, they weren't just losing money. They were losing credibility, face, confidence. The kind of damage invisible on balance sheets until too late. The barista brought a second coffee without asking. "You must be staying a while." She smiled kindly. "You look like you just won something." I didn't answer at first, then smiled softly, subtly, something like that, and sipped in peace. It's strange how an ending can feel like a beginning. A week had passed since the deal's collapse. 7 days since Carrington's name trended across every industry headline, since Chloe vanished from LinkedIn, and the board issued an internal memo filled with corporate doublespeak, strategic restructuring, leadership reevaluation, corporate code for "we messed up." I hadn't spoken to anyone at Carrington since my meeting with Gregory at Miriam's office. I didn't need to. My silence, paired with contract logs and press fallout, said more than words ever could. There was no gloating, no urge to return. The victory came and went, and I didn't need to stand amid ashes to prove survival I hadn't just survived. I'd redesigned the whole architecture Monday morning. I received a call, not from a reporter or gossiping colleague, but from Marcus Levinson, Senior Procurement Director at Constellar Erasure. We hadn't spoken since the panicked night he called me. I expected a brief courtesy call. Instead, his tone was calm, measured, precise. The same man I once negotiated across 12-hour time zones with in Munich, Olivia, he said. "We've had time to assess everything, and leadership on our side has made a decision." I waited. "We'd like to retain you," he continued. "Not as a vendor contact, but as an independent advisor, strategic counsel for our internal infrastructure team." I blinked, processing. "You mean as a contractor?" He shook his head. "No, as a partner." After a brief pause, he added, "With full discretion, a flexible contract, and a compensation package that makes your last Carrington salary look like pocket change." I didn't respond immediately. Rising from the dining table, I moved to the window and gazed down at the city alive beneath me. Taxis weaving through intersections, pedestrians crossing with coffees in hand. The same chaos I used to be buried in daily, now somehow distant. "I appreciate the offer," I said slowly, "but I'm not here to rebuild what I had. I'm not looking to recreate Carrington elsewhere." Marcus didn't hesitate. "We're not asking for that. We want you, your judgment, your process, the part of the deal no dashboard or title can capture." He paused, voice softening. "We know what we almost lost." Something shifted inside me. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't about reclaiming status. It was about being truly seen, without politics, without noise, without raising my voice to be heard. "Send the paperwork," I said. 2 days later, I signed the agreement from a quiet workspace uptown. No cubicles, no badges, no flickering fluorescent lights. Just natural light, my own desk, and a clean laptop free of any system baggage. I chose my hours, I chose my clients. I chose my words. I wasn't anyone's fallback plan or a placeholder for a younger, cheaper version. I was the plan, not because I demanded it, but because I'd proven systems don't run on code or key cards alone. They run on judgment, on memory, on people like me, the ones who quietly hold everything together until you try to cut them out. And the whole foundation caves at 4 p.m. that Friday. I returned to Camden Rowers, the same cafe where I'd watched Carrington's collapse make headlines a week earlier. The barista recognized me. "Same table?" she asked, smiling. I nodded. She brought over a cappuccino with a little chocolate square on the side. "On the house," she said, as I took a sip. My phone buzzed. A text from Jacob. "Board replaced Gregory official as of this morning, new interim CEO from outside, no mention of Chloe." They tried to clean up the mess, but it only reminded everyone who caused it. I typed a brief reply. "Told you, the system never forgets its author." I set the phone down and smiled. Not a broad grin, but one that settled deep in the bones, the spine, where power doesn't need to be announced. They thought kicking me out would erase me. They thought my silence meant surrender. But that silence was the point. The silence was the trap. And once it sprung, I didn't have to lift a finger.